Good evening.
Good evening.
Hymn number 508. Love lifted me. 508. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stayed within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All my heart to him I give, ever to him I cling. In his blessed presence live, ever his praises sing. Love so mighty and so true, merits my soul's best songs. Faithful, loving service to him belongs. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above. Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by his love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows his will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. 506. I'd rather have Jesus. 506. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hand than to be the king of a vast domain and be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything that this world affords today. I'd rather have Jesus than man's applause. I'd rather be faithful to his dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to his holy name. And be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. He's fairer than lilies of rarest bloom. He's sweeter than honey from out the comb. He's all that my hungering spirit needs. I'd rather have Jesus and let him lead than to be the king of a vast domain and be all in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. Announcements. Wednesday, prayer and Bible study. Bill will be leading us. Saturday, hayride, 5:30. Bring your fixins and your food, and there will be a bonfire. Pastor will be on vacation next Sunday morning. He will have the evening service, and Paul Katzian will be speaking. Men's Fall Banquet coming up in Ottumwa, the 28th. October 30th, Ministry Night. Bring a snack. Then coming up November 6th, quarterly business meeting, and we will also be having our church Thanksgiving meal that Sunday. And then Operation Christmas Child is coming up. $509. He lifted me. 509. In loving kindness, Jesus gave my soul in mercy to reclaim, and from the depths of sin and shame, through grace He lifted me. From sinking sand He lifted me, with tender hand He lifted me. From shades of night to lights of light, oh praise His name, He lifted me. He called me long before I heard, before my sinful heart was stirred. But when I looked to Word, forgive me, lifted me. From sinking sand He lifted me, with tender hand. From shades of night to lights of light, oh praise His name, He lifted me. His brow was pierced with many a thorn, His hands by cruel nails were torn. When from my guilt and grief forlorn, in love He lifted me. From sinking sand He lifted me. From shades of night, oh praise His name, He lifted me. Now on a higher plane I dwell, and with my soul I know 'tis well. Yet how or why I cannot tell, He should have lifted me. From sinking sand He lifted me. From shades of night, oh praise His name, He lifted me. Alan, come share the word with us.
Good evening. Good evening. I would introduce myself, but I think you know who I am. I live on the south side of Farmington. Let's see what's going on. Well, you might, Chad knows, but what I'm going to talk about tonight, and I think I'll talk about Vanna White. Would you come and help me turn the letters? Okay, what do those two have in common? Okay. Would anyone like to buy a letter? A vowel. Yeah. Yes. That's close.
The first sin.
I think Michael said it has I in it.
I thought that's what she said. Okay. She gets the prize.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That's a hint for buy a vowel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I got to get my notes out here. Now, I'm not going to talk very long, but these are my notes. Yeah, you'll never guess who done this for me. Santa.
How many trees?
And you'll never guess whose idea that was. Anyway. Well, anyway, we're going to, very obvious scripture, what I'm going to start out with, and that's Isaiah chapter 14, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We could kind of call that maybe the first sin in some respects. I'm going to look at let's start with verse 12. Now art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Verse 13. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the earth. Verse 14. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Now that's kind of where we get, you see the personal pronoun I used many, many times, which obviously that's in reference to pride, the author of pride, you might say, Satan. And we don't like to give him credit, but he is good at that, using that on people. So anyway, and I think we've talked about love here recently quite a bit, and it's brought out that pride is the enemy of love. Because if you're full of pride, there's no room for love. Self-love totally consumes you, if you want to call it self-love. And we could see in 1 Corinthians, which we won't look that up, 1 Corinthians 13:4 talks about love vaulteth not itself. It's not puffed up. And of course, that word vaulteth really means bragging. And many times a person who's full of pride does a lot of bragging. How many of you know who Dr. Charles Stanley is? First Baptist Church, Atlanta. Okay, everybody looks like pretty much. He tells a story that he was going somewhere on an airplane and he was on the aisle seat. Well, the guy that come in and sat on the other aisle seat right across from him was the leader of one of the biggest Christian organizations in the United States. And obviously, he didn't give his name or the name of the organization because everybody would know him. And he said, you know, they greeted each other, and he knew right away who he was and so forth. And he said, you know, Charles, we made it. We're at the top, and there's no one really close to us. And Charles said, it stabbed me in the heart when he said that. Like he couldn't believe it. And this point was making is the danger of pride. Now, this guy wasn't what we'd say from the beginning, a bad guy, insincere, and all that. But the danger many times of success is it can destroy a person. And of course, there's examples in the Old Testament of kings and so forth. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, and that's why I mentioned that. And pride is basically, we all know what it is, it's basically showing off our abilities, assets, and accomplishments, and acquaintances. We know somebody that the world thinks is important and so forth. And one I was going to kind of mention here, you know, we hear a lot of talk about prosperity preaching and how it's gotten popular, especially on the TV, as we talk about assets. But you know, 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 7, and I'm going to use Alan's paraphrase here, basically says, God makes the rich and God makes the poor. In other words, there's some people that are not supposed to be rich. It would destroy them. And we've seen that in people who've come into large sums of money. I can remember several years back, I was watching on a local radio, a TV station there in Des Moines, and some fella out in the south side of Omaha won, oh man, I don't know how much in the lottery. And I don't want to put him down, but he lived in pretty poor conditions. And he was a little bit on the rough side. But they went back a year later and they interviewed him, and he just went on and on. He said, I regret winning that money. He said, I've made more enemies. Family members and stuff would come to him and would you give me money for this and give me money for that? You got a lot of money. So that's kind of an example of people that sometimes desire to be rich. Maybe they're not supposed to be. And he won it through a gambling situation, which, you know, that's kind of the Bible's kind of negative on gambling anyway. So we got to be careful. And I don't want to this is not a double-blind study, but the time that I've spent in third world countries, and I don't like to say this, but it seems to me like the people there are a little happier. And I know being in the United States, you can't think that, you think that, or we're kind of taught to think that everybody that lives everywhere else is terribly depressed and discouraged and so on. But of course, now I'm talking about mostly the Christians that I dealt with in those countries and their churches and so forth. But it just seems like that, you know, and we've talked, I and some of the other guys that were there, we talked about this, that, you know, they're happy. They seem to be so happy, but they're not dealing with the problems that we're dealing with either. Their life is much simpler, and they've got the same mental capacity as we do and able to cope with things just like we are, but they've got a lot less to deal with. So anyway, and we also see that pride is a major problem in relationships. It seems like when people are having trouble with somebody else, pride is involved somewhere. And Proverbs 13 and verse 10 says, only by pride cometh contention, but with a well-advised is wisdom. Now that's pretty strong. Only by pride cometh contention. We see there that pride causes conflicts and quarrels. And I got 4 illustrations here, and that I thought I might read to you. And the point I want to make about pride is it's kind of a universal sin in non-Christians and Christians. Now, you might say, well, a Christian's capable of doing any sin. Well, that's true, but you don't generally find Christians who are alcoholics. You don't generally find Christians who use illicit drugs. Yes, there's probably a small percentage out there, but there's certain sins that Christians stay away from. But the point that's bringing is that pride is so subtle, it sneaks in and it ruins a lot of Christians, destroys them. And these four things I want to mention as I talk about the world. There's two guys in a bar, and one has a tattoo on his arm that's a flower. And one of the other guys says, why do you have a flower? That only should be on a woman, shouldn't it? What are you, a sissy boy? Next thing you know, there's a fight. One of them gets killed. The one that got killed had a wife and two children at home. Now, the two children grow up with no dad. The wife doesn't have a husband. And all for what? For nothing. No, neither one of them could have gained anything. It wouldn't matter if you won the fight or didn't win the fight. What did you accomplish? The next illustration is a man works in a company, and that he's been with for quite a few years, and he's skilled trade, and he's making pretty good money. And I'm just going to call him electrician. I'm not sure what particular job. And he really knows the transformers, the 460 volts, and all the stuff that's in this company. Well, the company hires a young supervisor out of school that's had management training, but knows nothing about the business. And he comes out and he tells the skilled worker, he says, I want you to do such and such. And the skilled worker says, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, a fight, and I don't mean physical fight, a fight of words comes, and the skilled guy gets fired. He goes home, tells his wife and two kids, I lost my job. Why? We would say, well, he obviously needs anger management. That's what the company would have probably said, even though he's terminated. But isn't it deeper than that? Is it pride? The root behind the reason he got mad, or the hatred that comes up. And then the third one that I wanted to mention was marriage. I don't know too much about marriage, but anyway, I understand that sometimes there's disagreements. And I can understand why. Now, we don't believe in psychology here, okay? But they do teach in psychology that men and women are not compatible. Did you know that? I don't know if any of you know that. But anyway, I thought that was kind of cute. But anyway, the same story, except not one particular disagreement. You know, they get to arguing week after week over something, and then one of them says, you know what? I can't live like this. I'm not happy, even though we know life isn't always about being happy. And they split up. There's two kids and a wife, and the kids grow up with no father. And it's so sad that three of them paid the price. Now, regardless of who was involved or who started, that doesn't matter. And then the fourth one, this is my favorite, church business meeting. Now, these are real. I've been in a couple of these, a little bigger church than this maybe, but where things got, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, and I'm not saying it ended the way I'm going to end this one, but something comes up that needs to be bought, let's say, something kind of expensive, and someone says, oh, I wouldn't buy that, you know, and pretty soon someone's offended because they thought they should get that, and the other one said, good. Well, the person that really wanted to do it, he can't lose. Pride won't let you lose. What's he do? He leaves the church. Him and his family leave the church. Well, let's just say he's been there quite some time and he's got some friends in the church, and they leave the church with him. Well, if Joe's going, I'm going to go too. Church split. Over what? Maybe a $470, I'm thinking of one particular instance, a $475 vacuum sweeper, you know. and then there's a church split. And but the thing these have in common is they could be Christians and non-Christians, and it's all pride. And whoever won any of these battles, it's no big deal. But pride just takes over, and you lose perspective, and self takes over. And that's why we have to be so careful, because we're all so susceptible to that. And of course, in Proverbs 1, in chapter 5, the first part of the verse says, a wise man will hear and will increase in knowledge. Now, pride, as we know, prevents you from hearing. Why? Because you have all the answers. Why would you want to hear what somebody else got to say? You already know everything. You know more than him. You're better than that person. So why would you want to listen to him? But a wise person increases his or her knowledge. Think about it when a person goes to college. Do you sit there and talk all the time? No. You sit in a classroom, you listen to somebody that's way more trained than you are in the subject. That's why you're there, and you're paying big money. And because that knowledge is valuable, well, and you do very little talking because you're not learning when you're talking. And pride says, I don't need to listen. I know you like a book. So this is getting into relationships and the problems that pride causes and how it's always behind. They say good communication, I don't know if this percentage is right, you should spend 80% of your time listening and 20% of your time talking. So that brings me up with another short story. You all know who Dr. Charles Stanley is. We already established that. He was by himself, and he went to a restaurant. And they set him down in a booth, and he was sitting there. And then about distance from these pews here was the booths down the other side, and two ladies came in and sat over beside him. Now he said, I want you to know, I'm not into gossip, and I don't try to hear what other people's talking about. But he said they were kind of loud talking. He said, the one lady, she talked, and she talked. You know what the other lady said? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. About 3 times. Uh-huh. And he said, I thought, there's no communication. That's not communication. They're two friends that went out to have lunch together. And he said, what was accomplished? So there again, the point he's trying to make is we have to listen to other people and to protect us and not be arrogant. And maybe you can learn from them. Like you might tell someone what the temperature is, and then they might say, yeah, it's supposed to get down to 45 tonight, and then tomorrow, maybe you didn't even know that. Now, maybe you learned a lot more besides trying to convince them you're a meteorologist and go on forever. Well, anyway, in Proverbs 12:15, we see the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise, which is basically saying counselors were not going to counseling necessarily, but listening to other people and learning from other people. And it's very important. And another danger of pride is it provokes criticism. Proverbs 21, verse 24, a proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath. Many times they'll make fun or belittle other people and scorn people. And there again, that's a way of elevating yourself. If you can put someone else down, that's automatically a human trait, we might say. That kind of elevates yourself because, well, I'm smarter than he is. Well, maybe you are, but you know what? There's somebody smarter than you, unfortunately. That brings me up to a point. I had this friend who was a rougher, very technical job. And he was a hard worker, and eventually he kind of got to where he was basically running the company, and he was designing the structures to help hold up tile roofs. Whenever somebody want to put on a tile roof, regular rafters won't hold it. And he started doing that. Well, all the time he was doing this, he was going to Drake, going to night school. I mean, for years. Finally got his 4-year degree, became friends with the professor there, and the professor got him a PhD program down in Knoxville, Tennessee. A special program where you jumped the master's degree and went right to PhD. Very hard. Well, I went down to visit him, and we was driving. Why I remember this, I don't know, but in his car, and he said, "You know, I'm soon going to be a doctor in economics." He said, "I know so little about economics." He said, I know about that much. He said, "There's that much out there to know." It's such a broad field. Now, to me, that's kind of humility. He said the more he learned, the more he realized he didn't know. It's such a huge field. And so, education doesn't always puff people up, and money doesn't always puff people up. But I just thought that was interesting that he was, that to me, that sounded very humble. Now, this guy was a professing Christian too. And I don't know, as far as I know, he's in Winona, Minnesota at the University of Minnesota now as a professor. But it's kind of interesting. So really, when you think you know a lot, you really don't. And knowledge is changing so fast, You've heard stories about these guys who go to school and and I'm getting off subject, computer science. When they get out, their degree's almost obsolete because it's changed so much since they started going. So, but anyway, we talked about the scorner. We know about Luke 18, verse 10, the Pharisee and the tax collector. Now, we know that tax collectors were not a very well-respected people at that time, but the Pharisee was religious, but we know he was not pleasing to God at all. And this kind of goes into the point of we need to be humble. If you don't know very much about the Bible at all, it's very plain that God only deals in humility. And many times he doesn't answer prayer because we're not humble. He wants to be in charge, and he wants to make the decision. So we see from the Bible, we see it in Proverbs, that humility is so important. And of course, once pride enters in, humility's out the window. Not only love, but humility's gone. And we know the tax collector said in Luke 18, verse 13, "God be merciful to me, a sinner." In other words, he was admitting that he wasn't a good person, as the Pharisee would say, because the Pharisee would say, "Well, I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all I possess," which is further up in the chapter. But that's not appealing. That's like telling God, "I'm going to get to heaven by my good works." And many of those people are good people. They make wonderful neighbors sometimes, but it's so sad, that's a form of pride. But God, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to go to heaven my way, not the way you said in the Bible. So anyway, I'll keep moving here. We have to be careful, and I think I've made that very plain, of having an inflated opinion of ourselves. It has destroyed so many people. And I didn't research this out much, but they claim that Adolf Hitler was raised in a Christian home. And I don't know a lot about him, but the fact that he was really good for Germany at the start. He really straightened a lot of things out, a lot of the economy and all that. And then he turned, and you kind of wonder, was that his plan all along, or did the power and the prestige get a hold of him? I don't know. But Hitler's kind of classified as what would be one of the worst people. Sometimes you talk to somebody, they say, "Well, yeah, I think people like Hitler will go to hell." They'll mention Hitler. He's kind of the prime name that's thrown out. Of course, we talked about God not hearing our prayers, and that could be found in Psalm chapter 66 and verse 18, that God doesn't hear us if we have pride and we're not of a humble spirit. And it's something that we all have to struggle with our whole life, really. So we have to be careful. I kind of mentioned this in Pride Provokes Criticism. We have to be careful criticizing because that's to elevate ourselves. We may not see it that way because there are things we could criticize and we shouldn't. And pride prevents communication and causes more problems. And also, pride can cause confusion. Sometimes it's very difficult for an arrogant person to admit that they're wrong. I don't know, it's almost like once they go against God's principle of humility, Satan sends them deception, and you can't rationalize with them. Temper gets them into trouble, and it says, and pride keeps them there. Proverbs 16 and verse 18, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So we already said pride destroys relationships, and the hardest word for a proud person to say is, I'm sorry. And the next hardest word, three hardest words, was I was wrong. Yeah, especially if you're male. But anyway, and it brought about how many times parents are not getting, most of us in here aren't raising small children, but maybe there might be someone, keeps us from apologizing to our kids. And of course, we know that we are setting an example, whether we like it or not. And many times it says a type A person has a hard time with saying I'm sorry to maybe your child if you kind of lost it and got out of control and said something you shouldn't have said, done something you shouldn't do. It says when pride cometh, then cometh shame. But with the lowly is wisdom. That's Proverbs 11, verse 2, warns us. So we need to be careful. I'm not getting paid by the hour, am I? I don't know. I think pride is a very, very dangerous sin. It was a Catholic priest said in the 6th century. I wrote his name down somewhere. Pope Gregory in the 6th century talked about the 7 deadly sins, and the worst one, the number 1 sin, was pride. It's the most sneaky, that's not the word he used, but that's the word I use, sneaky on you, it slips up on you and causes serious problems, and it's possible for anyone to have. Like I said, some of us in here would have no desire for alcohol, or illicit drugs or anything like that. But something like that can slip up on people carefully, especially if they're given a position. Of course, the Bible talks about it. You take a young person and give them a high position, young in the Lord, and you have to be careful because pride can enter in. Like, look at me, I'm in charge. So I'm going to kind of end up here with. So what do we do? How do we prevent this? Well, there's 8 things that we should do to kind of help prevent that, or to keep in mind if any of these apply to any of us. Number 1, do not compare yourself with anyone else. Number 2, do not compete against anyone. As we know that we're all unique and we don't have the same gifts, faults, or anything else as the other person. Number 3, acknowledge the strength of others. In other words, we have to be more concerned about others. It's in our innate nature to be selfish. I think I mentioned this in here the time before. What's the most selfish thing in the world? A newborn baby. They scream when they want their diaper changed. They scream when they want to eat, and they scream when they want attention. The parent's job is to take that little baby and train him to be, they say the year of 18 years old, to be a self-sustaining person who's not totally consumed with themselves. In other words, not self-contained, but I mean able to stand on their own and not want everybody else to cater after them like I'm so important. Number 4, encourage those who are weaker than you are. Number 5, admit your mistakes. Number 6, we will to apologize if we have done something wrong. No, I said that wrong. Be willing to apologize if you do something wrong. Practice sportsmanship. It is, now, I'm afraid we're kind of losing sportsmanship in our games nowadays. You know, years ago, and when I was young, and I wasn't saying it wasn't going on then, the sports were more to encourage you on working with other people, building up your bodies, and now there's such an emphasis on winning, you know. And that is a goal, of course, but we should be involved in sportsmanship and be concerned about the other person. Number 8, do not let appreciation go to your head. When you get a compliment or something, don't let it go to your head. Because remember, everything we have comes from God. We wouldn't have anything. We didn't choose to be born here in America. Probably everybody in this room. And look at the blessings that we have. And won't take time to get into it, but I saw the formula one time for what a person's considered rich. And everyone in this room would be considered rich. And it was like, have another meal besides the one you got at home to eat when you get home. It's talking about a Sunday morning situation. Have another set of clothes besides the one you got on. And everybody raised their hand. This was in a Sunday school class years ago. And he went on and on and on. Pretty soon he said, okay, according to the world standards, everybody in this room is rich. So, you know, how can we feel like we're really being hurt? We're just blessed and blessed and blessed. But anyway, I hope that I said something here that can help protect us from this dangerous sin. And I probably speaks more to me than probably anyone. Been on my mind for about 6 weeks, and I thought that this would be what I talk about next, because I don't know why. And I've watched a couple sermons on it, and it's just it's kind of scary when you think about it. When you see all the people in the Bible that failed because of pride, it's sad. You know, we're so vulnerable. So let's bow our head for a short word of prayer. Gracious Lord, we thank you for this time. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for everyone that's here tonight. Go with us and help us be better people, Lord, and be more concerned for others. In Jesus' name, amen. That's right. I forgot that was even on.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
Kind of a strange place to happen. Kind of the most